Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. The 14th National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference has begun in the country's capital, Beijing. 2,977 delegates are expected to deliberate on issues of interest over the next couple of weeks. The CPCC is China's highest making decision body and sets the government's agenda over the next 5 years. Known as Agenda 1.4 Billion, Premier Li Keqiang said in a 40-page document the country's economic structure had improved, infrastructure was further upgraded, reform and opening up were deepened, the quality of the economic environment had improved significantly, and that living standards had risen steadily. Our correspondent, Amarachi Ubani, reports from Beijing.
It's political season in China, and for the people, it is perhaps the only chance they probably have to see the representatives face to face, and probably the only time you'll find all of the country's political leadership in one room. (2,977 national delegates are expected to attend deliberations this year, but at the opening ceremony on Sunday, only 2,498 made it to the Great Hall of the People, including President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Keqiang. Visiting journalists like myself and other colleagues in China this period of time were invited to monitor the ceremony, as were diplomats representing different countries. The major address came from Premier Li Keqiang, who highlighted the government's achievements over the past year. Achievements such as reduced unemployment, the benefits of socialism, reduction in inflation, and a prediction of economic growth. While there were restrictions as to how many of us could attend the sessions, I asked a couple of international journalists what they thought about a press briefing held before the opening ceremony and what they thought about China so far.
They're going to have constitutional amendments. They're going to talk about the domestic policy, foreign investment, and things of that nature. There are just under 3,000 deputies in this Congress, covering every region, every ethnic group, every sector. He was very clear to mention that and to repeat that. So that gives you an idea of, from the ground up, the information that is required, because they're dealing with a lot of people. So they need to know what's happening on the ground so they know how to do the policies and so on for the next year. I am very comfortable with what I've heard, and it doesn't come across like China is the big bad wolf, as is portrayed in the international media. I am comfortable with what I've heard, and I look forward to hearing more as the days go on.
Adequate space should be given to journalists from all over the world. I think so. Many journalists were there, but they were deprived of question. I would appreciate that people from other countries also should be accepted. Indeed, China is a beautiful country. China has grown manifold. China has got a beautiful and unimaginable economic policies. I would appreciate that they should take us also into consideration in the press conference.
The new Chinese Foreign Minister, Wang Yi, the latest entrant to the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, holds an international press conference on Tuesday, March 7th. Hopes are that he'll provide better understanding of China's perspective on global issues. In Beijing, China, I'm Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
Meanwhile, China is confident of achieving its 2023 growth target as consumption picks up steam. That's according to the vice head of the State Planning Committee. He made the disclosure after Parliament set a modest goal of expanding the world's second largest economy by around 5% for this year. China's economy staged one of its weakest performances in decades last year, when GDP grew by just 3%, squeezed by stringent COVID-19 protocols, a crisis in the property sector, and a crackdown on private enterprise. Analysts noted economic and financial risks featured more prominently in this year's work report, highlighting the government's concerns over a slowing global economy, local government debt, and persistent problems in the property sector. Steps to improve the country's employment rate also featured prominently, following China's urban employment rate falling for the first time in 6 decades in 2022. Meanwhile, a senior official of the National Development and Reform Commission says China's GDP performance was outstanding amongst global major economies in 2022. Speaking at a press conference in China's high-quality development, Zhao Zhenqing, vice chairman of the commission, says that from a longer perspective, China's achievements can be viewed in a more comprehensive and in-depth way in the last 5 or 10 years, which highlights the quality and level of China's economic development. In 2022, official data showed China's GDP was 121 trillion yuan. That's about 17.95 trillion US dollars in 2022, a 3% year-on-year expansion. Mr. Zhao said the GDP growth rate is calculated using constant prices, which can reflect the growth of an economy relatively, objectively, and accurately. He said China follows a philosophy of people-centered development and aims to benefit the people while contributing to world peace and development. He notes that China follows a win-win strategy of opening up, actively participating in economic globalization, and strives for common development of all countries. Mr. Zhao said China welcomes all countries to share the benefits of its rapid development. Away from China, U.S. President Joe Biden made his case for stronger voting rights during a visit to Alabama to commemorate the 58th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, when state troopers beat peaceful protesters who were marching against discrimination. Mr. Biden's trip to Selma is his latest event aimed at underscoring his commitment to black voters who helped propel him to the White House and remain a key constituency going into his expected 2024 re-election bid. The trip is happening as Mr. Biden's efforts to pass voting rights legislation have stalled in Congress. The president spoke at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where state troopers clubbed and used tear gas against the 1965 voting rights marchers, including John Lewis, a black civil rights activist who went on to become a U.S. congressman. Coverage of the brutality shocked the nation and helped spark the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Mr. Biden made a veiled reference to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a potential presidential candidate, and other Republicans who have criticized and even outlawed some educational efforts about racism and slavery.
I've been on this bridge before as vice president, as a candidate for president, and was even before as a senator, because history matters. And now I'm here as your president. The truth matters, notwithstanding what the other team is trying to hide. They're trying to hide the truth. No matter how hard some people try, we can't just choose to learn what we want to know and not what we should know. We should learn everything. The good, the bad, the truth of who we are as a nation. And everyone should know the truth of Selma. The right to vote, to have your vote counted, is the threshold of democracy and liberty. With it, anything's possible. Without it, without that right, nothing is possible. And this fundamental right remains under assault. The conservative Supreme Court has gutted the Voting Rights Act over the years. Since the 2020 election, a wave of states and dozens of anti-voting laws fueled by the big lie and the election deniers now elected to office. God bless you all, and may God bless our troops.
U.S. President Joe Biden. Meanwhile, Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis took his fight against liberalism deep into Democratic territory in California as part of a national roadshow as he lays the ground for an expected White House bid. Mr. DeSantis has been meeting with wealthy donors in recent days and burnishing his national credentials in a series of speeches, boasting about his achievements in Florida while lambasting the woke ideology of leaders in Democratic strongholds, including California and New York. Mr. DeSantis, who is expected to announce a presidential run in the next few months, has made a war on liberalism a central theme of his governorship and a way to appeal to the Republican base. He was speaking at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library about 50 miles north of Los Angeles, where he attacked Democratic governors and leaders as being infected with a woke mind virus. He decried their policies on tax, vaccine mandates, and classroom indoctrination.
Thank you. Hello, California. I know you guys got a lot of problems out here, but your governor's very concerned about what we're doing in Florida, so I figured I had to come by. And I believe parents in the state of Florida should be able to send their kids to elementary school without having an agenda jammed down their throats. They should not be teaching a second grader that they can choose their gender. That is wrong, and that is not going to happen in the state of Florida. And I know you have a company down the road in Burbank that had different ideas about that, but I can tell you this. Disney may have gotten everything they wanted in Florida for the last 60 years, but there's a new sheriff in town now, and we are not backing down to that. We are also working to reorient higher education towards those goals that I had mentioned. And to do that, we've already enacted reforms so that all tenured professors in the state of Florida must undergo review every 5 years and can be let go for poor performance. We will also be signing legislation during our legislative session to ensure that our universities operate in a colorblind fashion. And accordingly, we will be eliminating all DEI bureaucracies and programs. No more discrimination. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. God bless.
Republican Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. Over in Australia, parts of the country's east, including Sydney, recorded their hottest day in more than 2 years, with temperatures hitting more than 40 degrees Celsius. Total fire bans are now in place for multiple regions across most of New South Wales, while 35 public schools, mostly in inland regions, have been closed due to the severe heat. According to the Bureau of Meteorology, the hot and dry conditions are likely to persist until Wednesday.
My first time in Sydney. I arrived this morning and I'm leaving in a couple hours, so I really want to check out Bondi Beach, but there's like no shade. It's just very hot, so we're leaving in a bit because we don't want to be in the sun for too long, but it's really good. Such a nice day.
Am Strand ist es in Ordnung, aber ich würde sagen, wenn man nicht am Strand ist, ist es ziemlich heiß. Also wir waren richtig am Schwitzen, aber es ist sehr schön hier.
But we've got hot, windy and mostly dry conditions over much of New South Wales, and that's driving low to severe intensity heatwave conditions across eastern New South Wales. We're forecasting temperatures in the high 30s right into the low 40s for much of eastern and northern New South Wales.
And staying with the weather, but in Africa, where the Mozambican weather authorities say Cyclone Freddy is returning to the Mozambique Channel and Zambezia and Sofala regions may be hit. According to the meteorologists, the storm is moving at a speed of about 13 kilometers per hour towards the southwest coast of Madagascar and could reach severe tropical storm stage. Mozambique's National Institute of Meteorology has predicted continued heavy rains over the ocean and winds of up to 110 kilometers per hour, accompanied by gusts of up to 150 kilometers per hour, which could disturb the sea, generating waves that are about 10 feet tall. The agency, however, wants people to take precautionary and safety measures. Meanwhile, for more than 100 countries, they've completed a UN treaty to protect the high seas, a long-awaited step that environmental groups say will help reverse marine biodiversity losses and ensure sustainable development. The legally binding pact to conserve and ensure the sustainable use of ocean biodiversity, under discussion for 15 years, was finally agreed after 5 rounds of protracted UN-led negotiations that ended in New York at the weekend, a day after the original deadline. The treaty is seen as a crucial component in global efforts to bring 30% of the world's land and sea under protection by the end of the decade, a target known as 30 by 30, agreed in Montreal, Canada in December.
Given the limited time available, it is impossible to properly review the draft we have just received. Large parts of this text are very much new to our delegation and represent parts of deals in which our delegation did not have a chance to participate. We are not prepared to limit our further engagement to technical amendments and reserve our position broadly in this regard.
Furthermore, we want to express our concern regarding the method of work employed that did not guarantee the equality, equity, the balance, and transparency during this process, with multiple parallel meetings, making it difficult for small delegations to participate, thus excluding some developing countries.
As the drought in the Horn of Africa enters a 6th failed rainy season, the UN Refugee Agency is calling for urgent assistance to help millions of displaced people from Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya who struggle to survive amid scarce water sources, hunger, insecurity, and conflict. Due to a scaled-up humanitarian response, famine has so far been averted in Somalia, but people continue to battle life-threatening food and water shortage, resulting from massive losses of harvest, livestock, and income. Local commodity prices have also remained at an all-time high and are out of reach for many.
With no immediate end in sight to one of the longest and most severe droughts on record, UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, is appealing for $137 million to provide life-saving aid to 3.3 million refugees and internally displaced people who have been forced to flee their homes in search of safety and assistance, as well as affected local host communities. The dangerous confluence of conflict and climate in the region is worsening an already dire humanitarian situation. As a result, hundreds of thousands of people have been uprooted from their homes in search of safety and assistance. In Somalia alone, since the start of the year, over 287,000 people have been internally displaced due to conflict and drought. Due to space constraints, for instance, in Kenya's Dadaab camps, arriving refugees seeking relief from this climate catastrophe have been forced to reside along the outskirts of the camps, where assistance is limited.
And when we return, Goya Velasquez paintings temporarily return to Spain a century later. We'll have details in a moment. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. A warm welcome back to The World Today. The deputy spokesperson for the Secretary General of the United Nations, Farhan Haq, says violence in Somalia has killed at least 80 people and injured a further 451. These figures are according to the UN mission in Somalia and the UN Human Rights Office between December the 28th and February the 28th. Mr. Haq added that more than 185,000 people have reportedly been displaced and hospitals have been damaged as a result of the insecurity.
Those of you here? Today, in a statement, the humanitarian coordinator for Somalia ad interim, Magata Gwise, said that he is extremely concerned about the humanitarian impact of the fighting in Las Kanud in the disputed Sul region. According to the UN mission in Somalia and the UN Human Rights Office, between the 28th of December and the 28th of February, the violence killed at least 80 people and injured a further 451 among those not fighting, including medical personnel. Mr. Guis noted that with the fighting now in its 4th week, More than 185,000 people have reportedly been displaced, and hospitals have been damaged, jeopardizing access to essential care for the wounded. He called for respect for humanitarian and medical workers, respect for medical facilities and services, and to allow the wounded and sick to receive the medical care and attention required by their condition without discrimination. Mr. Guis also called for unhindered humanitarian access to all those in need.
And staying in Africa, where the United Nations mission in South Sudan from Nepal has received the UN medal for its service in maintaining durable peace across that country at a time when subnational violence and displacement is rising. Nepal's contribution to UN MISS began in April of 2014, and the mission remained committed to preventing conflict, protecting civilians, and keeping up the highest standards of operational readiness.
It is a unique and special moment for every peacekeeper who stands in front of an audience waiting to be pinned with the iconic UN medal. You deployed in AMIS in April 2022, and since then have steadily demonstrated excellent performance in implementing your duties.
Actually, first of all, professionalism. We feel that we get new knowledge in our professional career, working with different person from different countries. That's why I feel I get more professionalism during this mission.
Here in UNMISS, we have the FPU contingent who is standing right in front of me, but we also have the great pleasure of having at the moment 22 individual police officers from Nepal. And it's very easy to see them around in the compounds because they have their bright blue shirts. It's very easy to see you, and I would like to also in this moment say thank you for your efforts and your contribution to UNMISS as such.
And we're still in Africa, where Libya is questioning the will and desire of the current political actors to hold inclusive and transparent elections this year. That's according to the UN's top official in Libya, Abdoulaye Bathily, who was speaking to the Security Council. Wes Bathily, who is the special representative of the Secretary General for Libya and head of the UN support mission in Libya, said that following consultations on ways to overcome the current political impasse, he was pleased to report that by and large all regional and international partners agreed on the necessity to hold inclusive and transparent elections in 2023.
Are impatient. They question the will and desire of the current interim political actors to hold inclusive and transparent elections in 2023. I am pleased to report that by and large, all the regional and international partners agreed on the necessity to hold inclusive and transparent elections in 2023. Libya's political class is going through a major legitimacy crisis. One could say that most institutions lost their legitimacy years ago. Solving this legitimacy crisis should therefore be priority for all political actors willing to change the status quo. Regrettably, the already limited civic space in Libya continues to be further restricted, silencing the voices of civil society groups and activists. I am alarmed by a wave of arrests of women, human rights defenders accused of offending Libyan tradition, following the activation of the anti-cybercrime law on 17th of January.
Abdoulaye Bathily, the special representative of the UN Secretary General for Libya. 5 suspects appeared at a magistrate court in Cape Town earlier today over the disappearance of a 22-year-old German tourist last month. Nick Frischke was allegedly robbed while hiking, and some items stolen from him were found in the possession of the suspects. Police say among the items found was a credit card, adding that investigators believe it was taken during the robbery. The National Prosecuting Authority in the Western Cape said the case had been postponed until May 4th for further investigations.
I can confirm that the 5 men which were arrested for robbery with aggravating circumstances appeared at the Wynberg Magistrates Court this morning. They were found in possession of the items belonging to the 22-year-old German national who has disappeared. The court was told that there's more investigation that still needs to be done, which include taking the witness statements, the DNA, and analyzing cell phone material.
And finally on the program, masterpieces by Spanish painters such as Diego Velázquez, Francisco Goya, Bartolome Esteban Murillo, and Greece's Tom Nikos Chitopoulos, most widely known as El Greco, were seen today for the first time in 100 years back in Spain after the Prado Museum reached an agreement with New York-based The Frick Collection. While the Frick Mansion is undergoing renovation in New York, 9 artworks from the mostly Spanish painters will be displayed at the Prado along with 5 other related works. The director of the Frick Collection, Ian Wantropper, said the Frick has a small but excellent collection of Spanish paintings.
This is the first time in 100 years that we have lent this group of pictures. The Frick has a small but excellent collection of Spanish paintings, 9 paintings, and we're thrilled to have them here in the heart of the Prado's collection of Spanish paintings. And for us, what's I think most exciting is to not only share them with the public here in Spain, but to have juxtaposition. Traditionally, we've not lent paintings that were acquired by the founder of the collection, Henry Clay Frick, but we are in the midst of a renovation of our permanent house. It's a Gilded Age house, which he built in 1914, and it's beginning to show signs of age, and so, as we are all doing. And so we've moved out completely during this period to renovate the house.
And it's on that arty note that we're going to end the World Today today. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Ladi Akere Dulwale. Do have a pleasant evening ahead.